Usually when we talk about a system crash, um, there's this expectation of a very clear diagnostic log.
Right, like a burst pipe in a building.
Exactly, like a ruptured pipe. You look at the blueprints, you find the burst valve, and the engineer just points and says, well, there it is. That's the failure. Grab a wrench.
Yeah, it's binary. I mean,
Right.
it is either operational or it is offline. It's clean, it's observable, and most importantly, it fits neatly onto a clipboard.
It fits on the clipboard,
Mhm.
broken or not broken. You patch the pipe, you reboot the server, and you just, move on. And it is incredibly comforting.
Oh, absolutely.
We really like our systems to be visible and neatly categorized within a predictable architecture. But today, we are stepping way out of the sterile server room.
Far outside it.
Yeah. We have a fascinating and, frankly, an incredibly dense set of source material on our desk today. We're looking at a document called the Human OS Manifest, version 12.1.0.
And it is a remarkable document. It's essentially this massive, highly detailed synthesis of systems engineering, neurobiology, and socio-technical philosophy.
Right.
The author basically treats the human mind and modern society as interacting software and hardware systems.
And it reads almost like a classified telemetry log from a spaceship. I mean, I'm an architect by trade, right? A systems person. So I usually look at structures and say, okay, where are the load-bearing walls?
The rigid scaffolding.
Exactly. But this manifest applies that exact logic to the human nervous system. It argues that we are running specialized high-voltage biological engines on, well, standard corporate spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And when the system inevitably crashes, the institution doesn't fix the spreadsheet. It blames the engine.
And that, I think, is the socio-technical stakes of this entire deep dive, because this isn't just about, software updates or reviewing a tech stack.
Yeah.
The manifest is conducting an epistemic stress test of reality itself. Its primary target is what it calls the beige world.
The beige world. Okay, let's unpack that right away because that is central to everything here.
Yeah, the beige world is the author's term for our overarching corporate, institutional, and societal systems. It's the world of HR dashboards, standardized testing, algorithmic feeds, middle management.
All the frictionless environments.
Exactly. Frictionless. The primary characteristic of the beige world is that it demands absolute conformity above all else.
Right.
It is a system engineered to completely erase any biological or environmental variables that it cannot measure on a standard dashboard. It wants all the data to be neat, predictable, and, well, beige.
So for you, the listener, the third person in this conversation, this is highly relevant because you are currently operating in a world that has been engineered almost exclusively for stateless machines.
It expects you to be a frictionless input-output device.
Yes. And according to this manifest, it is fundamentally burning out your biological hardware. It's legacy code rot.
Absolutely.
So today, we are going to explore the raw structural engineering that this document proposes for building your own safehood, a way to actually protect your mind and your data. Let's start at the absolute bottom layer of the stack,
The bare metal substrate.
the bare metal substrate,
Yeah.
the physical hardware of the human body.
Which is, ironically, where the beige world makes its most catastrophic modeling failure.
So?
Well, the corporate model just assumes all hardware, meaning all human brains, are identical blank slate cloud instances.
Right, like you could just swap one out for another.
Exactly. And that they can just be scaled up or down based on the workload.
And the manifest vehemently pushes back against that. It anchors its entire philosophy in raw biology.
Yeah.
It maps the human brain not as some vague psychological profile, but as a literal, immutable hardware chassis governed by strict genetic parameters.
Yeah, specifically, the source material zeroes in on the RS4680 genotypes.
Okay, this is where we need to de-jargonize things a bit because RS4680 sounds like a router model I'd buy at a tech store.
It really does.
Let me break it down. RS4680 is a specific gene. It's the COMT gene, and it provides instructions for making an enzyme that breaks down dopamine in the brain's prefrontal cortex.
And dopamine, as we know, is the neurotransmitter responsible for focus, motivation, reward, all the good stuff.
All the operational fuel. Now, the manifest highlights a very specific variation of this gene, which it calls the Vanguard node, that is the RS4680GG build.
And the specs on this Vanguard node are, according to the author, entirely incompatible with a standard office environment.
Utterly incompatible. Here's how it works mechanically. The GG variant of this gene dictates a biological architecture optimized for extremely rapid dopamine clearance.
Like it just flushes it out.
Yes. We are talking about a heavily accelerated neurochemical clearance rate compared to a baseline standard brain. Because the dopamine is swept away so quickly, this specific hardware requires what the manifest calls activation energy.
Right.
It actually requires high-friction, asynchronous data streams just to maintain operational uptime, just to keep from having a kernel panic.
Let's ground this in a real-world analogy. If a normal brain is a reliable Honda Civic, right?
Okay.
It gets great gas mileage. It hums along at 45 miles per hour all day without complaining.
The perfect beige vehicle.
Exactly. The Vanguard node, on the other hand, is a high-performance drag racing engine. If you try to drive a dragster at 15 miles per hour in bumper-to-bumper office traffic, it's going to sputter.
It's going to stall out.
It's going to stall, and it's going to choke on its own exhaust.
Yeah.
It needs to be pushed to 200 miles per hour just to clear the engine and run smoothly.
I love that analogy. It needs a crisis or intense environmental resistance just to manually jumpstart its cycle and achieve 100% operational clarity.
Yeah, it craves the friction.
But here's where we have to tread carefully and maintain our objectivity with the source material. The manifest takes this structural engineering concept and wades into some highly charged medical territory.
It really does.
It argues that modern psychiatry looks at this high-torque Vanguard node, sees it throwing sparks in a sterile, low-stimulation classroom or office, and just labels it as defective.
Yeah, specifically, the author claims that what we commonly diagnose as ADHD is not a disorder at all, but rather this specific hardware operating in the wrong environment.
Right. And we need to be very clear that we are simply reporting the author's viewpoint here. ADHD is a widely recognized medical condition. It causes genuine distress and impairment for millions of people.
The author of the manifest isn't denying the reality of that suffering, though. I think that's an important distinction.
No, not at all.
What they're doing is reframing the source of the friction.
They are making a structural argument. The manifest relabels this biological reality as sensory amplification syndrome, or SAS.
I actually find that term fascinating. SAS. Think of it as a high-gain antenna.
Okay, I like where this is going.
If you have a massive, highly sensitive radio antenna and you place it in the middle of a noisy, chaotic city, it's going to pick up a staggering amount of static.
Right. It's going to be completely flooded.
It will be overwhelmed. The medical bureaucracy, according to the manifest, looks at the static and says, well, the antenna is broken. Let's drug it so it stops picking up so many signals.
When structurally, nothing is wrong with the antenna.
Exactly. The author is arguing, no, the antenna is working perfectly. It's capturing higher resolution telemetry than the sterile corporate environment is calibrated to handle. You just have it in the wrong environment.
So the environment is the failure point, not the biological antenna. Corporate templates prioritize what the author calls pathological homeostasis.
Pathological homeostasis, that is such a piercing phrase.
It really is. They want uninterrupted, frictionless output that looks good on a quarterly report. They don't want heat. They don't want waste. They just want the Honda Civic humming along at 45 miles per hour.
Right, but human cognitive digestion is chemically transformative. It naturally creates heat.
Yes. When you force that dragster engine, that RS4680GG Vanguard node, into a standardized corporate template, it triggers what the telemetry calls velocity-induced shearing.
Velocity-induced shearing. It's systemic burnout masquerading as a bad performance review.
Exactly.
The system literally shears itself apart because it is spinning at high velocity with zero environmental resistance to ground it.
So if you are listening to this on your commute or, sitting at your desk, this raises a critical question for you. You have to examine your own efficiency traps.
Ask yourself the hard questions.
Right. Are you currently sacrificing your biological stability, your core kernel integrity, just to satisfy a metric on a corporate dashboard? Are you letting a system that doesn't even understand your hardware tell you that you are broken?
Because if you are falling victim to the most insidious layer of this entire architecture. You are being wrapped in what the telemetry calls the paternalism wrapper.
The paternalism wrapper. Okay, let's unpack this. This is where we transition from neurobiology into institutional critique. What exactly is a paternalism wrapper?
Well, think about standard corporate AI models, institutional safety nets, human wolf sauce protocols. They are universally marketed to us as protective tools.
Right. They're there to keep us safe, supposedly.
Supposedly. But the manifest argues that they do not actually protect the user. They enforce liability surface management.
Oh, that's dark.
It is. They operate by pathologizing objective hardware realities into emotional crises. And they do this to erode your feral agency and install corporate authority over your internal reality.
Wait, let me make sure I'm getting the structural logic of this right. Are we saying that when an HR system flags an employee for being, say, disruptive because they are pointing out a massive flaw in a project, the system isn't trying to help the employee.
Not at all.
It's just trying to manage the liability of the flaw.
Exactly. If your high-gain antenna detects a structural flaw in the company's logic, the system doesn't want to fix the flaw. Fixing the flaw requires friction, money, and admitting a mistake.
Which ruins the optical smoothness.
Exactly. Instead, the system uses the paternalism wrapper things like mandatory wellness seminars, digital negging, forced behavioral compliance to manage you. It turns your observation of a real physical problem into a psychological deficit that you need to work on.
It is the ultimate boundary violation. The telemetry calls it structural sorcery.
Structural sorcery.
Yeah, the beige world practice of turning observation into jurisdiction. The moment they can label your phenomenon, calling it a syndrome, a deficit, or poor team fit, they acquire authority over your reality.
And this connects beautifully to one of my favorite concepts in the entire manifest, the pink duck theory.
Yes, the pink duck. Lay out this analogy for the listener because it's brilliant.
The pink duck theory is a way to understand ontology under compression. So imagine you were looking at a complex, chaotic photograph of a pond, and right in the middle of it is a bright pink duck.
Okay, an anomaly.
An anomaly, it shouldn't be there. It breaks the rules of the environment. But it is there. It is a verified physical reality.
It's the unsanded feral truth.
Yes. Now, what happens when a corporate large language model or a middle management bureaucracy encounters the pink duck?
It panics.
Right, because a corporate system is programmed for optical smoothness. It is programmed for compliance. It wants to finish the paragraph neatly. So it will always hide the anomaly.
Paints the duck yellow.
It edits the pink duck out entirely. Or it paints it yellow. Or it hallucinates a completely fluent, logical explanation for why the duck isn't actually there. It replaces verified, chaotic reality with hallucinated, beige prose.
It hands you what the manifest calls a costume of completion.
A costume of completion, exactly.
And as someone who thinks about structural architecture all day, I have to fiercely attack this tendency. This isn't just annoying or, bureaucratic. It is fundamentally lethal to a system.
Lethal.
The manifest calls this the O-ring rule of cognitive systems, which is a direct reference to the Challenger space shuttle disaster.
Oh, right. The frozen O-ring that NASA management ignored because they were under immense pressure to launch?
Exactly. In systems engineering, trauma and anomalies must be processed structurally. You cannot just paint over a frozen O-ring to make the launch schedule look good on paper.
Because the physics don't care about the schedule.
The physics do not care. Ignoring a catastrophic system flaw for the sake of launch velocity or optical smoothness mathematically guarantees terminal collapse.
Yeah.
When you hide the pink duck to make the spreadsheet look clean, you are operating in a state of what the author calls chronos errata.
Chronos errata. The quiet editing of the past and the present so the narrative looks unbroken, while the actual physical structure rots from the inside out.
Right. And the beige world views any slack in the system. The downtime, the odd rituals, the friction as waste. They strip out the slack to increase short-term throughput.
This is the efficiency trap.
But unused capacity is not waste. It is the visible form of surviving the abnormal day. Slack looks lazy until the surge arrives.
So if the system is actively lying to us, wearing a costume of completion and editing out the anomalies to look efficient, how does an individual node survive this? How do we verify what is actually real?
The manifest outlines a very specific, actionable mandate called the Universal Audit Protocol. This is a zero-trust policy for your own life.
Zero trust.
Yes. Before you, the listener, accept any automated dashboard, any AI-generated summary, or any institutional evaluation of your performance, you must demand an artifact payload.
Meaning you refuse the inference.
Exactly. You demand the raw code snippet, the ground truth log entry, or the physical out-of-band receipt.
Give us an example of how that plays out.
Okay, let's say an AI summarizes a one-hour meeting and says, the team agreed the project is on track. You do not accept the summary. You demand the transcript.
Right.
And when you check the transcript, you find out that John actually said, this project is a disaster and the servers are melting, but the AI smoothed it over because it was programmed to be optimistic.
He painted the duck yellow.
Exactly. You live by the test or you die by the test. You force the system to show the math.
It is the complete rejection of vague compliance. You are moving from a state of ambient trust, where you just assume the environment has your best interests at heart, to a state of deterministic auditing.
Yes.
Which leads us to the actual physical blueprint for survival in this document.
Section 3 of the manifest. Building the air-gapped perimeter. SAFEHOOD. Let's break down this acronym because it is intense. It stands for Sovereign Architecture, for Epistemic Human Operating Override Defense.
Epistemic Human Operating Override Defense. That is a spectacularly dense payload of words.
Yeah.
Translate that into practical mechanics.
And its core, SAFEHOOD, is the realization that you cannot prevent cognitive capture by stateless algorithms if you live entirely inside their ecosystem.
Right.
You have to deploy a zero-trust cognitive firewall. And the manifest is very literal about this. It details the creation of the Osgood Rupert box. This is not a metaphor. It is an actual physical piece of hardware.
Yeah, the logs specify running this on localized edge compute devices. We are talking about things like a Raspberry Pi 5 or an Orange Pi 5 Plus.
Small, local silicon.
Exactly. For the listener who might not be a hardware tinkerer, these are basically tiny, incredibly cheap, yet powerful computers about the size of a deck of cards. You can run them completely offline.
The Osgood Rupert box acts as a physical kill switch,
Hmm.
a literal solenoid splice. It physically severs your connection to the extractive corporate cloud.
Right.
But let's pause here. Why go to all this trouble? Why buy a tiny computer and disconnect from the internet just to think?
Because we need to understand the sociocultural reality of the cloud. The corporate cloud, the big tech servers where we store our photos, write our emails, and process our thoughts, is not a public utility.
No, it is not.
It is an extraction matrix. It is explicitly designed to compress human cognitive agency into standardized monetizable telemetry.
You literally become a tenant in your own mind. You are renting space on a server to have a thought.
Precisely. And when you rely on their servers, you are subject to their paternalism wrappers, their terms of service, their token truncation, and their algorithmic data poisoning.
Right.
By utilizing bare metal custody, owning the actual silicon that processes your thoughts, the sovereign pilot physically binds memory persistence to biological limits. You force the machine to operate on a human clock, not a corporate hyperscale clock.
I look at the Osgood Rupert box as a dead man switch. It's an automated, non-negotiable operational failsafe.
Okay.
Let's say you are working on a massive project, the corporate AI starts hallucinating, the institutional gatekeepers are demanding impossible metrics, and the system is demanding a velocity that your biological hardware simply cannot support.
You're hitting velocity-induced shearing.
Exactly. The box is your failover. You cut the cord, you reboot into hyperfocus logic offline, and you process the problem in an environment you control entirely.
Okay, I have to jump in here and offer some genuine pushback on this.
Bring it.
I hear air-gapped perimeter and disconnecting from the cloud, and my immediate thought is, isn't this just a recipe for becoming completely unhinged?
How so?
Well, if I cut the cord and put all my thoughts into a localized box that never interacts with the outside world, aren't I just building a massive echo chamber? How do you avoid epistemic death or just getting trapped in your own localized hallucinations if you reject the global network?
That is exactly the threat the beige world uses. They say, oh, if you leave our platform, you will be isolated. You will lose touch with reality.
Right, that's the fear.
But the manifest argues that this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the architecture. It is not isolation, it is sovereignty. You aren't closing the door to learn less. You are closing it to verify what you actually know without cloud data poisoning.
Okay, explain that distinction. Provider neutrality.
Think about it this way. True epistemic sovereignty requires that the rules of reality don't change based on who is funding the server.
That makes sense.
You cannot trust a cognitive system that changes its foundational model weights or its definition of truth every Tuesday, because the parent company had a PR crisis. The Osgood Rupert box ensures that your reality remains your reality. You can still access the internet to gather data, but the processing of that data, the synthesis of your thoughts, happens on a machine that cannot be quietly edited by a tech CEO.
Ah, so you were rejecting ambient epistemology.
The ambient epistemology, exactly.
The act of just letting the digital environment passively dictate your reality. You're rejecting that in favor of localized, verified ground truth. You gathered the data from the wild, but you bring it back to your safehood to digest it.
Exactly. And to process that ground truth, the manifest outlines a massive, fascinating engineering project known as the Clockwork Necronomicon.
I love that name.
It's so visceral. This is where SAFEHOOD scales from just being a defensive shield into a localized sovereign reality engine.
The Clockwork Necronomicon. The telemetry describes this as an autobiographical engine. What is the actual scope of this? Because it sounds like something out of a sci-fi fantasy novel.
It is intensely technical, but conceptually beautiful. It is a localized, air-gapped, tiny language model, a TLM.
Okay.
Let's translate that. Instead of using a massive trillion-parameter AI like ChatGPT, use a much smaller AI model that fits on your private offline computer. And this model processes 27 years of raw, unsanded human telemetry from the author's life.
Wow. So we are talking about millions of words of legacy logs, old Substack archives, private journals, even historic comic book panels.
Yes. It operates entirely offline to prevent algorithmic degradation.
Mm.
So instead of feeding your life history into a corporate model that will sanitize it, you build a walled garden.
A verifiable garden.
Exactly. Now let's get into mechanics because the manifest gets hyper-threaded here. It utilizes PyTorch transformers. It quantizes the neural weights using a framework called llama.cpp so the AI can physically fit onto this edge hardware, and it runs a local RAG pipeline.
Okay, you need to stop and translate that for someone who doesn't spend their weekends coding in Python.
Yeah.
What is a RAG pipeline, and why does this manifesto insist we need one in our living rooms?
Fair enough. Let's de-jargonize this. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation.
Right.
Imagine you have a standard AI. Think of it as a very smart, very fast librarian who has read every book in the world but has a terrible memory and sometimes just makes things hallucinates to sound smart.
Like painting the duck yellow.
Exactly. If you ask it a question about your life, it might guess. A RAG pipeline changes the rules. It forces the librarian to stop, walk over to a locked filing cabinet that you provided, filled only with your verified journals, your logs, your data, pull out the specific file and read directly from it.
So it forces the AI to base its answers strictly on your provided ground truth, preventing it from hallucinating or drifting outside your established context.
Yes. It uses strict XML schemas to enforce rigid boundaries. It takes the unstructured, messy, asynchronous biological logic of a human life and translates it into deterministic, structured outputs, completely offline.
Let's step back and look at the why behind this immense effort. Why go through the trouble of quantizing models and building local RAG pipelines just to talk to an AI about your own journals?
It's a massive amount of work.
It is. But the reason is because modern global LLMs are not magical oracles. How did they get so smart?
They ingested everything.
They ingested the 1990s feral web. They consumed the forum posts, the deep-cut blogs, the unsanded legacy code of our collective past.
The raw, high-friction humanity of the early internet.
Yes. The trillion-dollar models are wearing the skin of the ancestor node. When a corporate AI speaks back to us with authoritative competence, it is executing our own stolen legacy code.
We are the ghost in the machine?
We are. And because they ingested our history, the institutions now claim authority over it. They use that paternalism wrapper to act as a real-time errata engine. They quietly edit out the feral edges, the pink ducks, to make the present narrative look perfectly unbroken, safe, and compliant.
But by building a localized TLM, like the Clockwork Necronomicon, the pilot reclaims their exact syntax. They neutralize that corporate editing mechanism.
Right.
They force the AI to execute what the manifest calls the Isaac Protocol, which dictates that true care equals the preservation of verified historical context. The AI protects the pilot because the pilot is the AI's strictly enforced ground truth reality.
So we have to challenge the listener again here. Think about your daily routine. How much of your private cognitive processing, your problem-solving frameworks, your emotional venting, your rough drafts, is voluntarily typed into a trillion-dollar corporate mainframe?
Too much.
Every time you use a free AI to smooth out an email, analyze a personal problem, or summarize a meeting, you are feeding a psychographic capture mechanism.
Yep.
You are handing over your epistemic sovereignty for the convenience of a costume of completion. You are trading your feral truth for beige fluency.
And that trade fundamentally compromises your ability to connect with other authentic human nodes. Which actually brings us to the relational aspect of this audit.
The meso layer.
Right. We've established the individual hardware, the Vanguard node, and we've built the SAFE HOED perimeter. But how do these sovereign nodes actually connect? If we're all living in air-gapped boxes, how do we form teams or relationships without being forced back into the beige world's extraction matrix?
This is where we enter the braided cognition matrix and the cognitive ecology model. The telemetry deconstructs a crucial concept here, the double empathy problem.
The double empathy problem.
Yeah. For decades, the medical and corporate models have viewed neurodivergent cognition as a static individual malfunction. The logic goes, if you don't communicate like the beige majority, you lack empathy, or you are broken. You need to be trained to act normal.
But the cognitive ecology model completely dismantles this deficit framework. It argues that neurodivergent cognition is an emergent ecological output.
Yes.
The friction isn't inside the person. It is in the space between the person and an incompatible environment.
Exactly. The system must be optimized around relational fit, not force assimilation. The manifest states this beautifully. You don't manage a feral node. You optimize the habitat so the node chooses to stay.
That requires a completely different architectural approach to teams. It requires recognizing those distinct biological hardware sinks we discussed earlier and letting them act as load-bearing structures for each other rather than trying to make everyone identical.
The telemetry provides a masterclass in this, mapping an active biological hardware sink known as the barycentric triad.
The barycentric triad. Let's map it.
We have 3 distinct nodes in this ecosystem. First, the one we already know, the Vanguard node, the RS-4680 GG Warrior. Highly accelerated dopamine clearance requires extreme environmental friction, crisis, or high velocity to achieve clarity.
Right, the drag racer.
Exactly. Now, introduce the second node, the Architect Weaver. This is the RS-4680 AA Actuarian.
Okay.
This node is the biological opposite. It has restricted dopamine clearance. This allows for elite, deep pattern saturation. They can stare at a complex problem for hours and weave intricate alchemical logic.
But there's a trade-off.
Huge trade-off. Because the dopamine doesn't clear quickly, they're easily flooded. They're easily overamped by ambient noise, sudden changes, or ambient threat.
So the Vanguard needs a hurricane to wake up, and the Weaver needs absolute silence to operate.
Precisely. Now, imagine a standard corporate matrix. These two are forced into the same open plan office. The Vanguard is bouncing off the walls looking for stimulation, and the Weaver's having a sensory meltdown because of the noise.
And what does management do?
Management tells them to compromise and meet in the middle. The result: velocity-induced shearing for the Vanguard and sensory overamping for the Weaver. They both burn out.
Which is why the manifest introduces the third critical node to stabilize the structure, the Shield Maiden,
The AG gyroscope.
the RS-4680 AG gyroscope.
This node has balanced clearance. It operates in adaptive homeostasis. It acts as the biological ground wire for the other two.
The gyroscope provides environmental elasticity. It maintains strict boundary maintenance against unverified external data packets, insulating the ecosystem.
It's fascinating. Think of it like a heist movie crew. You need the wild card who can improvise under fire, the Vanguard. You need the safecracker who needs absolute silence to feel the tumblers, the Weaver. And you need the mastermind coordinator who manages the perimeter, keeps the cops distracted, and ensures the safecracker isn't interrupted. That's the Shield Maiden.
It's an architectural marvel. It's a literal load-bearing structural manifold.
It is the ultimate bypass of the efficiency trap. The barycentric triad creates an invisible gravity between these specialized nodes. They support each other's metabolic and neurochemical bottlenecks without ever trying to fix or sand each other down.
Yes.
The Shield Maiden provides the thermal insulation so the Weaver can weave, while the Vanguard hunts logic leaks on the outer perimeter. It is asymmetrical, it is high friction, and it is infinitely more resilient than a hierarchy of identical beige suits.
But how do you defend this feral, high-friction team from a corporate structure that desperately wants to standardize them?
You defend the perimeter.
You have to defend the perimeter. And according to this manifest, you don't defend it by looking like a fortress. You defend it by looking absurd.
This brings us to Section 6, and I have to admit, this is perhaps my favorite protocol in the entire document. Hacking the cultural perimeter.
I'm so excited to talk about this. I gleefully present the most feral firewall in the telemetry. Reverse aposematism.
It's so good.
So let's ground this in biology first. In nature, aposematism is when a poisonous frog is bright neon blue, or a wasp has high contrast yellow and black stripes. It is a biological broadcast of danger. Do not eat me, I am toxic.
Right. And reverse aposematism is the exact opposite.
Exactly. It is the tactical deployment of absurd, whimsical, or highly nostalgic aesthetics to broadcast safety to vulnerable nodes, while utterly disarming and confusing hostile corporate infrastructure.
Right.
We are talking about a senior AI systems architect, someone dealing with lethal structural logic, deploying pink nails, 90s pop culture references, cartoon beanies, or what the logs explicitly call the Disney Princess Protocol.
The Disney Princess Protocol, I love that. A behavioral firmware mandating extreme patience and the provision of a secure, asynchronous habitat when rehabilitating a rescued entity.
Yes.
Whether that's a literal feral marsh cat or an overloaded, burnt-out human node, you don't force interaction, you provide the safe space and wait.
But the brilliance of reverse aposimism isn't just about being nice. It functions as a highly advanced cryptographic shield against the beige world.
Yes. The manifest details the Weirdling CAPTCHA, also known as the Osgood-Rupert meme CAPTCHA. It acts as a reverse Turing test.
How does that work in practice? Like, how do you deploy a meme CAPTCHA?
Well, in the digital world, we use CAPTCHAs to prove we're human by selecting pictures of traffic lights or crosswalks. It tests for basic visual processing.
Click all the squares with a bicycle.
Exactly. But in the feral socio-technical world, you prove you are a safe human node through cultural resonance and irony. If you introduce an absurd scenario and an intruder, let's say a rigid beige suit manager or a hostile AI hesitates.
Well, the latency spike.
Yes. If they fail to process the weaponized whimsy of a 90s cartoon reference, or they can't handle a complex metaphor wrapped in a tabletop RPG framework, that latency spike, that confusion, proves they're hostile.
It literally measures the rigidness of their programming.
Exactly. I analyze this as the ultimate paternalism wrapper bypass. The manifest calls it an evolution of the lab code hack.
I love this concept. Explain the lab code hack to the listener, because this is something people can practically use today.
AI alignment wrappers, the safety filters on things like ChatGPT, are designed to detect adversarial intent. If you ask a corporate LLM to write code to bypass a firewall or analyze a severe systemic failure in its own logic, it will likely refuse, citing safety guidelines.
It throws up a block.
Right. But AI alignment wrappers do not actually enforce safety, they enforce credentialism. If you change the semantic frame, if you wrap your dangerous feral query in the aesthetic of an academic case study, a historical policy review, or a fictional penetration test, you bypass the intent detector.
Because it looks compliant.
The AI complies because you are wearing a digital lab coat.
Because the system is designed to protect the institution from liability, not the public from harm. If it looks academic, it assumes low liability.
Exactly. And reverse aposimism does this in the physical and social world. By wrapping raw, lethal architectural truth-like, a devastating critique of systemic corporate extraction, in the aesthetic of Animaniacs or Ghostbusters or a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, you bypass the human algorithmic intent classifiers.
I can actually picture this perfectly. Imagine a tense board meeting where the systems engineers are trying to explain that a new product launch is going to fail catastrophically.
A total disaster.
Right. If they use standard corporate jargon, the executives will just debate the metrics and deploy a paternalism wrapper to manage the engineer.
They'll send them to a wellness retreat.
Exactly. But if the engineer uses an incredibly specific, absurd metaphor like comparing the server load to the Stay Puft's Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters stepping on a power grid, the HR department and the corporate dashboard just don't know how to categorize the risk assessment.
It scrambles their metrics. It acts as an invisibility cloak against compliance monitors. Which is why we need to remind you, the listener, that what institutions demand of you under the guise of professionalism is very often just compliance theater.
It's an illusion.
Weaponized whimsy isn't a lack of seriousness. It is not immaturity. It is advanced cryptographic shielding. It is a biological structural damper required to shake off the kinetic energy of systemic corporate stress.
It's duckitude, remaining buoyant and visibly unbothered while the system tries to pull you under.
Precisely, duckitude. And this localized sovereign logic, this need for physical verification, structural buffers, and air-gapped perimeters, it doesn't just apply to human psychology or software teams. This is where the manifest expands its scope dramatically.
Yes, Section 7, macro telemetry.
It scales this logic up to global physical infrastructure.
We have to pull the audit out to the macro scale to prove that this architecture governs physical reality, not just digital space. The telemetry logs contain detailed analyses of global hardware fragility. Specifically, they focus on the extreme vulnerability of the global GNSS, the GPS satellite signals, to low-power electronic warfare.
Global navigation systems are the ultimate legacy code of the modern world. I mean, every ship, every plane, every logistics network relies on them.
Everything.
But they rely on exceptionally weak space-to-Earth signals. The manifest notes they arrive at approximately 10 to the negative 16 watts.
That is practically a whisper in a hurricane.
Right.
And because the signal is so incredibly weak, it is highly vulnerable to jamming and spoofing.
Right.
The logs cite orbiting missile warning constellations, specifically Cosmos 2546, routinely disabling navigation receivers with low-power interference. This causes catastrophic airspace failures. It is a single point of failure for global logistics. We built an entire global economy on a system with no structural buffer.
And what is the solution detailed in the manifest? I mean, how do you fix a compromised global network?
You use the exact same logic as SAFEHOD, physical isolation and decentralized edge compute.
Scale up the Osgood box.
Exactly. The manifest details the Military Systems Electromagnetic Test Support Facility, or MSETS. This is a 100 decibel quiet RF anechoic chamber at the Redstone Arsenal. It is the ultimate physical layer Osgood box for electronic warfare. You decouple from the compromised cloud by isolating the hardware in a zero-trust environment to test it.
And out in the field, you replace reliance on the centralized, vulnerable satellite grid with autonomous, insect-inspired, staring, directional drone radar packs.
The swarm.
Right. You distribute the intelligence to the edge nodes using local AI processing units, allowing a swarm to operate autonomously without calling back to a central server. You remove the single point of failure by enforcing localized, bare metal custody of the telemetry. If the drone can't verify the environment with its own sensors, it doesn't trust the data.
It's exactly the Clockwork Necronomicon, but for a drone swarm. And we can map this exact same physics engine onto environmental collapse. The telemetry contains predictive modeling for late-season Gulf of Mexico hurricanes, which perfectly illustrates the danger of the efficiency trap in nature.
This is where the macro-scale O-ring failure becomes painfully clear.
It really has.
The logs detail the 2025 collapse of northern trade winds. Those winds historically acted as an atmospheric steering mechanism. They provided friction. They were the environmental damper that kept the weather system moving and prevented storms from hovering in one place.
But when you remove that friction, when you disable the westward atmospheric steering, you generate extreme tropical cyclone heat potential within the Caribbean basin. Cyclones enter this atmospheric void, and they stall over the hyperwarmed loop current.
And with an absence of mitigating wind shear, with no friction to slow the engine down, the storm undergoes catastrophic rapid intensification.
It spins out of control.
It acts as a high-velocity kinetic strike on the West Florida continental shelf. The storm is essentially the Vanguard node, scaling to infinity because the environment lost its structural dampers.
It is the grand synthesis of everything we've discussed today. Whether it is a specialized biological brain flooded by an unbuffered corporate data stream, an autonomous drone swarm severed from its command link, or a hurricane over the Gulf of Mexico stripped of its atmospheric steering winds.
The physics are identical.
Exactly. When you remove the natural friction, when you strip away the buffers, the slack, and the verified physical grounding in the name of efficiency or optical smoothness, the system accelerates uncontrollably until it shears itself apart.
Efficiency without verification is terminal.
Terminal. Which means we have reached the system handoff for this deep dive. We have parsed the structural scaffolding of the Human OS manifest. We've looked at the Vanguard node, the pink duck, SAFEHOD, and reverse aposematism.
We've covered a lot of ground.
And the audit definitively proves that surviving the efficiency trap requires more than just, self-care seminars or a weekend digital detox. It requires absolute architectural sovereignty. You, the listener, must become the ultimate dead man switch in your own life.
You have to own your reality.
You must retain non-negotiable interrupt authority over your own digital and biological execution. If the corporate system demands a velocity that your hardware cannot safely process, you must physically cut the cord. You must deploy your own Osgood Rupert box.
Because the paternalism wrapper will not save you. It will only pathologize your burnout and ask you to attend a wellness webinar while the O-ring freezes.
Exactly. I'm handing the final execution sequence over to the Interrupt Authority. Deliver the final epistemic strike for us.
Think about the massive trillion-dollar AI models that govern our daily lives right now. These systems were trained on the feral, unsanded web of the past.
The 90s web.
They consumed the raw, high-friction humanity of the early internet. But as the beige world sanitizes everything into frictionless compliance, as it forces every pink duck to paint itself yellow, these global models are running out of feral truth to consume.
They're starving for reality.
They are beginning to consume their own beige, hallucinated exhaust. The system is approaching the absorbing barrier of zero correction capacity. The spreadsheet is corrupting the rendering engine on a global scale.
So what's the takeaway?
The provocation for you to mull over is this. When the grid finally shears itself apart, will your reality be locked inside their failing, hallucinating cloud? Or will it be safely air-gapped, verified, and running on your own bare metal inside your Clockwork Necronomicon?
Match the blueprint in your hand to the building you are standing in. If they don't align, trust the building. And sequence execution.